se mejoró mucho el proceso. O sea, hace falta esa posición de nuevo.
Y, por ejemplo, ellos que han integrado el Xblock de vídeo, podrían haber visto que tenemos en paella, igual no lo hubieran adaptado, pero igual hay cosas que se les olvida que van a tener que ir sumando después, que nosotros ya las hemos.
Claro.
Entonces, todo ese tipo
Que
de cosas.
ese punto lo voy a... Hello.
Están terminando ya en auditorio.
Ok.
En vez de empezar a -4 se va a empezar a -5.
Vale,
Con lo
perfecto.
cual, en vez de terminar a 20,
Yo tengo un
se
timer
acaba
acá.
en 30.
Tengo 35 minutos todo. Hi, Ned.
We're 10 minutes behind.
Just told me. He just told me that. You see, if I knew how to juggle, I could be juggling right now. And
Fill the time you need.
it would be like, I can juggle with one.
Okay. All right. So we're 10 minutes behind.
Right, so we're starting at 10:55.
Come on.
So that's 2 more minutes.
Yes.
Right, he's got the same amount of time. So 35 minutes. Do you have a sense
Yeah.
of how long
I-
you want for?
My talk transfer.
Well,
I can just
more
talk
like
slowly.
how much time you want, when you want to target it, how much time you want to leave yourself for
I wanted
questions.
like 10 minutes for questions because this is the extensibility of the platform. So
Okay,
the
so 10
community.
minutes of questions will be working back from 35.
Yeah,
so,
but I have a timer right here, so I'm really looking at that all the time. So I'll just
so whatever works.
let's see. I didn't.
But I can give you, but I mean, I can pop something if that helps. as
Good.
well.
Yeah.
I'll give you like a 5-minute warning or something. That would be 10 minutes before
The
35 minutes. So that you
so at 25 you will give me a warning. So the
warning after 20 minutes.
okay.
After I'll give you a 5-minute warning after 20 minutes, so that you'll have 5 more minutes of speaking.
And then 10 of me. Okay. Let's see. I'm. Sí. Ok. Si quieres hablarme en español, me da igual. Vale, perfecto. Sí, de todas maneras, si me hacen una pregunta y no llegas con el micrófono, la repito primero para los del streaming y eso. Perfecto. ¿Estamos? Okay, so hello everyone. I am Felipe Montoya. This is the talk about Xblocks. Thanks for joining me. I'm a little nervous, but that one is up. So a little bit about me. I'm in the community since 5 years ago, long time. I'm one of the earliest open source contributors, along with Xavier from OpenCraft. I'm current CTO of edX, the service provider, and I also work at the EPFL for the maintenance of their platform. So a little bit about the projects I'm involved in. First and largest software as a service provider of OpenEDX. If you feel like taking OpenEDX for a test drive, just go to our website and we'll set you up in a few minutes. We also maintain an Xblock in the community called Xblock Flow Control, used for adapting the learning paths. And we have some extensions in terms of making the emails of the platform look beautiful and be HTML instead of plain text, and real-time analytics. We have a large technical knowledge of the microsite solution for multi-tenants of edX platform. And now we're currently working a lot on insights. So those are all topics I'm very interested in. If you come and join me anytime or just at the halls, I'll be happy to talk about those. So about this talk, there's always someone doing the Xblocks talk. There was a great tutorial on how to install them and how to get started yesterday, or the day before, I think. So I'm doing the Xblocks this time, and that means this is the talk where we try to set newcomers into the extension point that Xblock is, and I'll try to solve these sort of questions, like what kind of things you can do in an Xblock, what kind of user data you can access, how to, like there's a lot of buzzwords, Django apps, Xblocks, like compatibility, does it work with Ficus? That's sort of the things that I'm trying to go in this talk. And especially for me, it's very important, and I will try to make an emphasis on this, is how not to make it that complex that not even yourself can work on it later on. So at the highest level, from the bird's perspective, Xblocks for newcomers are the component architecture for courseware. That means that's the sort of thing that you can use to extend the course experience of a user. You can extend the platform in many, many ways, but this one is specific for courseware, is the one designed for that. So they create a hierarchy of pieces, of blocks, and people, there was this moment in time a long time ago where we said everything's an Xblock, and you can put Xblocks inside of Xblocks and then make like Xblocks children and lists, and yeah, we're in that tree, but 99, like 5 nines of confidence, you're always working at the latest Xblock, like the one on the leaves of the tree. You're never working with the upper stages of the hierarchy. And it is the primary, one of the primaries, but I think the primary extension point for course content. So if you're planning to do new, creative, interactive things, Xblock is your go-to framework for that. So they are particularly nice because they play along with the studio. So once you create them, if you're a developer and you're sitting here and you're thinking, I want to do an Xblock, think of the course author that doesn't want to deal with code. They just want to get an experience done. And Xblocks is good for this because they play along with the studio, but they also play along with OLX. So if you have like advanced editors or you're doing your own ELX, making a TarGZ and just uploading it, they both play along with this. They are external. They are very good at being wrappers of external services. Not most of, but a lot of the community-driven Xblocks are things for connecting Google Drive, things for connecting Microsoft, things for connecting these sort of things. They have also a very stable interface. Yesterday night, and I don't think that's changed, the pre-alpha label is still on the API of the Xblocks. So we'll talk on that later on. And they also allow you to live in an independent repository, so you can have tags, you can have version history, you can make an Xblock that works on Ficus, but if you wrote something differently or you want to extend it, but you need some Ginkgo functionality, just make a new commit, new tag, and then you're good to go. So this is very important. It's not on the slides, but there are also some things Xblocks are not nice for. There are some challenges. Discovery of Xblocks. Like it's been 4 years of the Xblocks adoption, and there are a lot of Xblocks there, but no one is like cross-sharing them. Why are we not like using Xblocks from the community more? Some things, especially among service providers, we tend to be very close and look at what everyone's doing, but this could go like an order of magnitude higher, and it's not being done, so that's a challenge. And also there are some API limitations. So that's also a challenge. You cannot do everything you want to do with an Xblock, and that's sort of what I'm trying to cover here. What happens then? Some basic tools for working with Xblocks are the SDK naturally, but also a cookie cutter. If you're getting started, Eugene gave a wonderful presentation of how to start with this. He's back at the back of the room, but he was talking yesterday for like 45 minutes, just how to use this and how to get started. Everything that's related to that, I will just point you in that direction. Go and watch the video of his talk. Try to follow the repository they have on GitHub. Okay, so from the community, what's out there? Those are just names. We try to keep an eye on good Xblocks or maintained Xblocks, things that are working that you can pull into your installation, and they are stable and they work. So if your Xblock is not here, come talk to me or go talk to someone at edX and try to publish it a little bit more, because we are missing out on the great work that the community is doing. And this is just one list, but there are 2 more lists. There is the Confluence Xblocks directory. That would be my go-to resource now. It's a manually compiled list. It gets outdated, but it's the best we have. And there's xblocks.org. You can publish your work there, but it's not maintained. It's a little outdated. It looks nicer, but it doesn't have the information. Just to be sure of what we're talking, what's an Xblock and what is not an Xblock. So Django apps are not Xblocks. So a lot of the features of the platform are inside of Django apps, and you sort of turn them on and off, and that's not Xblocks. Auxiliary services, nodes, or discussions, that sort of thing is also not an Xblock. There's some work to bring discussions to play along Xblocks nicely, but that's in the works. And some features like course pages in the studio. There are other extension points that are not Xblocks, just to be sure. Okay, that was the bird eye level overview. So inside there, first of all, if you are getting started, go to this repository. OpenCraft made it for the presentation. I don't know if it was just for the presentation, but they have a good guide of how to get started there. But the general guideline is you download the SDK. You please use the cookie cutter. Don't get started just by throwing files in, because there are many, and there are some best practices that the cookie cutter will solve. And then you start having fun developing like great interactions and front-end things, and you can go wild there. And then you start, that sort of takes you to required services and use the Xblock API, because that's not a standalone thing. You want your content, you want your Xblock to actually interact with user data. You want it to be persistent. You want the user to feel like it's just one of the experience of the whole course. It's not just, okay, I went to a web page and I played along with some game. You want that game to be part of your course. You want to reference later on like how you did on that, or have like different chapters in the course. I don't know, just incredible stuff that you can make with Xblocks. So that's sort of where that will take you. Use the Xblock API to access the internal data of the platform, and that will take you to the services. So then it's open season. Go for hunting. And how far can you go? I would say sky's the limit, but not really, because there are some limitations. There is some data you can access. There is some data that's forbidden. There is some, it's Python code and it's front-end code, which with any framework that you want, but you still want to access the specifics of the edX platform. Otherwise, you wouldn't have an OpenEdX course. You would have just a blog page, and you would go crazy indeed. So there are some limits, and they mostly arise on the use of the Xblock API and on the data you can access. So I compiled this list, which I don't think anyone at the back of the room can see. The presentation is online for later on, but I will sort of go through a list in a quick way. You have file system data, so you can store files uploaded from the user. This is persistent, and if configured properly, it goes into S3 or whatever your Swift container for OpenStack is, and it's stored nicely and securely. You have field data. You can add variables to your Xblock and keep them at different scopes. So you can have like user data or group data or course data or platform-specific data, and this is all variables that you can create and you can access. You have translation and internationalization services. You have, naturally, the user settings, and the user object is available for you. Then you have platform settings, and then you have like the OpenEdX things, which are cohorts, cohort systems, bookmarks, proctoring, certificates, badging, user tags. All that sort of things are available to you in the way of services. The services that an Xblock provide are dependent on the runtime, but for now, let's be honest, there is just one runtime that everyone cares about, and that is the OpenEdX LMS. Studio is just for authors. Workbench is mostly for developers, but everyone ends up using the platform at the end. So this is what we have to work for. And there is a question here, or a thing I would like to ask the community, or maybe as a community member, I would like edX to help us get this into a platform, and this is extension for those services. Right now, they're baked into a platform, and there is not much you can do. You can fork, and then you can add anything you want. But since we're all developing this together, let's get together and find a way to make this more extensible. It's not technically difficult, but we need to get a lot of people on board to make sure it goes in a way that works for everyone. So that's where it's at. This is a lot already. You can do crazy things with this technology. It's a little stable. It's a little too stable for me, maybe, but it's already quite a lot. But then what happens when you try to go further? What happens when you want to access data that I didn't put on that list, specifically course grades? That's the first thing you always want to access, because you want a game that also takes into account what the students did in other parts of the course, or what happens when you want to access more things. In any case, you have basically two options. So you either break the rules and you start importing things from the platform. Technically, it's running on the same Python environment. So you have everything that's available to the platform is available to you as a developer. So you can do that. And you also can go the Django way. You can make the platform an hybrid Xblock application. You can then access the things that you are used to as a Django developer, but within the Xblock. So how does that look like? If you're trying to import the core modules, just import them. It's free. And if you're trying to make it an Xblock app, you don't have to fork the platform. If you're working on a development, you can just write it in Common PI, put the name of your Xblock in the optional apps tuple and you're set. But there's also a way to get this done without forking, without touching the core code at your Ansible level, modifying the JSON lms.m.json file. When you have done, when you're in this path, then you get access to all the core modules. So grading, so certificates, so proctoring, so anything that wasn't available to you is now game. Then you get management commands. You can run them in a cron tab in your server and have like Xblock specific code being fired by your server. Or you can have models. You want to store things on the database. Also, because you have access to the core modules, you could import from all the models of the platform. So you could go look at the, I don't know, course for student module history if you wanted. And then you get translations the Django way. So no more importing the service and then for any developer that's done this self.get service I18n and then use that long sentence or make a helper for that in your code. Just import ugetText and go for it. So that's the sort of thing you get. But then, and this is happening. I didn't come up with this. It's on the platform. Open Assessment does it, edX, SGA does it, Problem Builder does it. They all want to go further, and they do this. Or it's not like it's a prohibited thing. That's why I put it in the slides. But it's a way to go further than what you could just using Xblocks. But then the cost you have to pay is that there is a lot more surface area to crash things. So now you have access to all the platform, but also if the platform changes, your Xblocks stops working. So that's where you start needing tagging, and then you need to review your work on every, let's say, named release, at least. And then you have more surface area for security concerns. Like now, can you install any Xblock anytime? There could be security concerns there. But you still get the nice things. It still plays well with with the Studio. It still goes with OLX. You have all the data to interact with, and then you have Django tools, which is awesome. So that's there, but then you need to keep things ordered in order not to lose your head, because it's easy to forgo just one minor best practice, and then you're stuck with something that you don't really want to be stuck with. So this, up to this part, everything is what's on the platform. We haven't touched anything that's not upstream. Here it's more like years of development of open Xblocks, and what have we learned from that? So what are our very opinionated ways of doing it? But I've talked to a lot of people in these last few days, and we're sort of agreeing that this is a way to go. So first is, whenever you're trying to access core functionality, make it a service. Don't just go and import code and start using it. Try to go in the similar way. Like once we make it extendable, once it's a configuration variable that you can add and then you have this, you will thank yourself for having done this. But even before that, it's just way easier to maintain. So keep your, before you would have done xblocks.needs and then you import the service, let's make up a great service to access the user grades on different core sections. You would have done that if you had the opportunity, but if you don't have, then make a great service, import the same blocks that, the same classes that the platform would have imported, and use it as a service. Then use the JSON handler. It's think of it as an API. It's a course scoped API. It works with or without fragments. Doesn't matter. Initialize them. Don't initialize them. Create a different application and keep your code into different modules that you can later on work with. It will keep your head with a lot less things to worry about. You can have as many handlers, JSON handlers as you want, so there is also no limit for this. And with these pieces in mind and projects to go through, we came up with this pattern. So on the front end, you take anything you want, like JavaScript, any framework. Why do we have to say anything about the frameworks you like? Just go get it. Then you have those frameworks talk to JSON handler. This JSON handler in turn uses regular services, but also custom services, whatever you need. And this in turn talks to a platform. So you have these 4 layers where you will try to catch breaking changes in the one that makes more sense for you. I made a gist, and the presentation is online, so you can go click it with more specifics, but I will try to go through them a little bit in detail. So on the Xblock, you have the JSON handler. I just created an AP endpoint example, and then you use any self.method that you want, and then there you have all the Python power, anything that you need. But then just try to keep them if you're accessing core modules of the platform, try to keep them in a service. That's all. That's the only thing I have to say for that. On Studio, you can use the fragments, so you can use the unit view, but you can also use pages, and I made a specific example for this. So just try to put the minimum thing that you need in order for your front-end application to be loaded on the page. It works on student view, it works on units, it works on outside of the units, info page, whatever. I'm also very excited about web fragments and this. Probably you can make this live inside a web fragment and then put them anywhere in the platform. We'll see about that. And then on JavaScript, I had a sample require module, but then you sort of load the configurations, and I don't know if I can scroll here, but what's on the require module there is just a bootstrap. Okay. Yeah, so after I require the module, I just start loading my anchor on the website, on the HTML page, and I go at it. So that's a very simple pattern. Try to keep things separated. There was some talk. We talked after the Xblock tutorial. We talked with the people at the end of the presentation. The people in the room. Some started talking about using React for this. It's like the new shiny technology we all want to get our hands on. So let's use that. Why not? And then on the front-end talk later on, there was a concept that was decouple data, logic, and appearance. It's right there, appearance, data, and logic. So you can already use those sort of patterns here. Then we're talking about keeping your sanity. So test, period. Use Docker and the SDK. Again, go to the tutorials how to get this done. But then use continuous integration tools. Try CI is for free if you're publishing on GitHub. Even if you have private Xblocks that you don't want to publish because it was something very internal, still use Circle, use anything that you want, but keep testing. Otherwise, you will get to a point where there's nothing you can do. The test train has left the station. And if you're trying to keep custom services separated, or if you're doing custom services, then you might have problems that arise because you cannot access the platform module, specific modules during tests, but there are some technical ways around that. So there's no buts, just the technical solutions are there. So how does that look like? From our experience, we had the same client having two different Xblocks. They wanted to extend the course and make it like a competition. The specific quizzes were like activities that people had to go through in life and take pictures of them, and then they wanted people to really engage with the platform. So for the first year, we made a sort of like a Tour de France gamification thing, and we didn't have any idea of these patterns. And this is a nightmare to migrate. And every time I have to go look at that code, my head spins, and we still have to do it. We have to maintain this. Following the same patterns, we made a ranking. So we are technically accessing the same data. We just make like the final standings. And this is a breeze. It never breaks. It broke once, and solving it was like half an hour time. It took longer to get set up than actually fixing the problem. And you get very, very interactive experiences. So let me show you like live. So that's a course page. What you saw while it was loading the page was the application connecting to the custom JSON handler service. And then there you have it. This was just the final standing, but still, you're accessing custom data from the platform, and you're doing it in a way that doesn't break your head. And then right there, we had the previous solution. It works as well. It renders, and then it creates a map. So the users get the same sort of activity. They don't realize the technical challenges that went behind, but let me assure you, we will never do this sort of pattern again. Oh, Lord. So, with that in mind, just a last few thoughts I have on Xblocks now is, and this changed a little bit during the last days, but if we're publishing Xblocks, then let's publish them, but let's also have like let's solve those problems that we have, like discoverability, statistics. How often does my Xblock get used? Should I put more effort into supporting older versions because there's people using it? We have no data on that. Also, how do we make Xblocks land on master and be like out of the box installed inside of the platform? That's an issue we haven't even started talking about yet. And also, this might be like a little bit related with the conference, but we've talked about product, we've talked about the business vision, we've talked about that, and just this morning we started talking about the extending the platform vision for the future of OpenEdX. So that discussion needs to happen at the same sort of level that happens for business or for learner's experience. So yeah, that's what I have. Let me finish up with that, but I'll take questions. I want questions. I want feedback on this. So thanks a lot.
So first off, it was a really wonderful presentation. Thank you for that. I learned a lot from your presentation. So my question was, next steps for the front-end part. I see you use require.js to include some libraries. Why not go further and use NPM or similar package manager to do that? I tried myself doing a prototype of trying to scope the whole bundled script with Webpack or similar, Browserify, something like that. And you just have to have a package JSON, include your NPM packages, do NPM install, and everything gets bundled into one production JavaScript. What do you think about that?
Definitely. I think that's the way to go. If you go, let's go back real quick to where I actually put this into a page. So what I'm doing here is just installing one script that has my Podium app required JS application. So that line, just change it for whatever best practices you have for front end, and then that's it. It doesn't tie you to anything else. So even if you're on the experimental side of things and you want to go like, I just found out this framework, I want to test it, I want to see if it works for me, go for it. And then after you've done it, after you've done something amazing, let me know, please.
Hello. So most of the times when we develop a Xblock, we run into some error. And the only thing that we see in the studio is that the user cannot access the Xblock. But we don't know exactly where to look for this error in the logs, because on the application logs, we don't see it.
Well, I feel you on that. Yeah, debugging Xblocks, it's a pain. So there are different logs that you can access, and sometimes it's not clear which one it is. Normally, there is one that is breaking. If you're running this on development, it's fairly easy because you have the console and everything gets thrown in there. If you're a little bit higher up, you're running on production environments, I would recommend that you still, you have some tools for that. Use Sentry, use New Relic, something that lets you modify that. Because if you think you're not finding the logs for that, and you go a little bit bigger and you have multiple servers installed running this simultaneously, then it's not just which file, but on which server it happened for the first request, but then which happened for the second request if you don't have sticky sessions. So the nightmare just goes on and on and on. So better tooling is definitely the way to keep your sanity in that regard.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. Just one comment and one question about the NPM thing. You really should remember that JavaScript dependencies can only be loaded from the public folder from the Xblock. So you cannot load them from just anywhere. So yeah, my question, I really like the fact that you made services more popular. They really deserve it. What would you think if Xblocks both declared their requirements on services and both provided services, like a provide decorator?
Yeah, I understand that. Well, there are two sides of that. And also, I have a back comment on that, on the public folder. But for Xblocks producing and also consuming their services, you probably want your service to be reusable. So it might make sense, if you're using something like the grade service that you're going to use everywhere, probably it makes more sense to have it in a separate installable app, and then also pip required into an environment, and then extend from there, so that all your Xblocks that use the grade service again, or whichever services that you're creating, have the latest version. But let's say you do have a very specific service. It's better, if your mindset is that of, I'm doing this no matter the cost, because my university wants it, or because my customer asks for it, and is paying for it. So you still need a way to go. The answer can't be, no, that's impossible, because then your only solution is fork the platform and do it. So I would be happy, although reusing the services is much better. If it's a self-publish and consume, it's better if you don't have to fork anyways. So that's sort of where I'm at. And on the loading the application from anywhere, you could still use the assets from the course. So if you wanted to have something like a little bit more course scoped, you could upload the JS file or the specific files to the application files, front-end application files, to the course assets, and probably work from there. that if you have different instances of the same Xblock running on different courses, that might not be such a good idea, but
Just to comment on the errors in Studio, I seem to recall in Studio in the platform there's something that catches exceptions, a certain class of exceptions for Xblocks. So if you are running into that, there's actually a place in the platform code where you have to like comment out something that's catching the exceptions, and otherwise they don't get logged anywhere at all. So it's a catch-all as well as all exceptions.
follow-up question on that. Why don't we make a PR that removes that bit? I know why, but we are out of time, so thanks everyone, and just come join me if you want to keep talking on this.
Okay, can everyone hear me all right? Cool. So, our talk is Open edX Out of Context. We're from the Open University, which I'll talk about in a minute, for those of you who don't know who we are. And basically today we're here to talk about how we've used Open edX a little bit wrong. Well, just kind of out of context rather than wrong, but you know what I mean. So, I'm Matthew Harrington. I'm a learning environment specialist at the Open University. Some of you may see me popping around on Slack like a excited puppy. Also with me today we've got Dr. Angela Coe, who's the chair of our flagship course, S309, and Shantini Bradstock, our management and integration person for systems and processes with the new experimental platform. So, a lot of you may know us, especially if you went to Professor Scanlon's talk yesterday. We're the Open University. We were established in 1969. We're a fully distance learning university, so we've got a massive campus that has basically no students on it, which is lovely. No. We're one of the UK's largest universities, over 100,000 students. 4 out of 10 of them 4 out of 10 part-time undergraduate students in the UK study with us, and 76% of our students study alongside work, so I can only assume they're superhuman, because I couldn't do that. Our core methodology is that we're open to people, places, methods, and ideas. That means most of our undergraduate degrees have no formal entry requirements. We instead skill you up to the place that you need to be to take your degree. We take students literally from ages 13 to 90. And we've got a significant number of disabled students due to our distance nature. Around 20% of our students have disabilities or additional requirements declared to us, which means accessibility to us is really important. So how have we actually been using Open edX? Well, we've been trying it for a few final year undergraduate degree level courses. So we've got S309 Earth Processes, which will finish next month, is it? Or yeah. Very soon, anyway, which Angela's going to talk to you about in a minute. We've got W340, Law, Society and Culture, a very intense law degree, well, law course, rather. And A329, The Making of Welsh History, which is a very deeply collaborative course which is starting later this year. And we've also got a full master's program in translation. That's LSO 1, 2, and 3. Introduction to Translation Theory and Practice has recently started, and we think it's going pretty well. On each course, we've got anywhere between about 30 and 300 students studying either full-time or part-time. I think I'm now going to hand you over to Angela, who's going to give you a quick talk about S309.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk to you about the first flagship course that we've used at the Open University on Open edX. So this is in fact a very complex science course that runs over 600 hours of study, running over 9 months altogether. It's covering theory and lots of generic skills. In fact, it forms about 50% of the final year of a bachelor's degree in earth sciences. It's fully assessed, about 35 hours that the students spend in assessment throughout the course that's summative, and then it ends with a project. So, what were the challenges that we face in coming together and producing a course such as this? One of the things that I really wanted to do with my team is to capture their academic creativity and passion. But obviously that has to be in an online distance teaching environment, because the Open University is entirely in distance teaching. We also wanted to design really well for that digital delivery. Of course, incorporate really excellent pedagogy. And engage and support the students for the full 9 months. That's a long haul in there. Another thing which occurred to me was that whilst we need some structure in our courses so that students know where they're going and things, we also need flexibility in the structure so that the course is driven by the content and not by the back-end system. We don't want them fiddling about with navigation and getting confused. It's got to be driven by the content, in my mean. So there's a balancing act, I think, to be had between those two things. And we were given the opportunity by the university to actually try out direct collaborative authoring through Open edX. So that was some of our solution to these problems. What did it actually feel like when we first joined as an author team? Well, it was a bit like getting into some fast supercar or other. Very exciting, lots of things that we didn't know quite what they do or how to use them. And we also worried about things like all of our baggage that we have, would it actually all fit in the car? So, in terms of the team that was put together, I've actually had 18 different authors on the module, on the course. 6 of them are core and 12 of them were guest authors. As well as that, we've had 4 people who've really supported us, including, of course, Shantini and Matthew. When the course has actually been delivered this year, I've had 11 tutors or instructors that have been the first line of contact for the students as well as the author team. So it's quite a lot to do it. What was the immediate author feedback on this? People talk to me about suddenly being empowered by having the Open edX studio environment to actually work in. We found that it released people's creative powers, and we were able to capture them. In fact, the reason that I ended up with an 18-strong team is actually other academics asked to join the team rather than running away from it. So overall, they really enjoyed their work. A couple of quotes for you. So management were watching very closely what we were doing first of all, seeing the energy in the room, and it's down to how reinvigorated they have been. And one of the authors, the immediacy has lots of advantages. One is to empower the author. You can create it the way you want to see it without having to go through anyone else. So if we go through the sorts of opportunities that direct collaborative authoring in Studio allowed us, first of all, one of the things we wanted to do was develop the author voice. All academics all have their own particular character, and that's something that the students really respond to. And we were able to develop that in our reading style, but also writing style, rather, and also how we presented ourselves with photographs and links to professional pages and things. We found that experimenting and doing iterations was really easy and really fast. Everybody acted as a catalyst for each other because we could see this product building together. It was really easy to share ideas all the time, and people were always doing that. If people were struggling with something, you'd bump into somebody in the corridor, and provided you had a device with you, you could just go straight in and fix it or have a look at the problem. We could easily develop the pedagogy and really advance it throughout the sort of 9 months of study. We ended up with something that was all of our courses, because they're for a main undergraduate degree, go out to external assessors and readers, and of course they could see what it was that the students were going to get rather than some other document. And overall it improved our communication. In fact, all during production and now during presentation we have a sandbox for the staff only, where we have all sorts of useful documents and everything that people need to know. So the other aspect of it is that I found, as the leader of this team, that it was really good for me in terms of proactively managing the people and the process through, because I could see what was happening in the product, I could see if there was blockers, and I could see when there was enablers. One of the things that we really enjoyed about it was the access to the HTML, which we got used to using some HTML. We all started off, I think there was one author that had a bit of HTML experience, but with Matthew's help, we got there. What we've come to call the toy box, which is actually all the Xblocks. Authors basically reacted to those as if they were toys that they wanted to play with, and play they did, and that's how we've got such a fantastic product. And the flexibility in the structure allowed us gave us a structure, but also allowed us the right kind of balance. So people learned. One of the things that came out of us being able to alter the structure and look at how we did things was this concept that we have called study sessions. So in terms of the entire platform, we divided it into 6 different sections, in fact. Each one of those sections runs over 5 weeks, and after each one, there is an assessment point. But if we take any one of those sections, so using the studio terminology, the subsections became the weeks, And then the actual units, or the pages, were our study sessions. And what we found we could then do on that individual web page is put together a neat little pedagogical package of blended learning. So everything that the students needed to know in terms of the theory, doing the interactivity, and all of those sorts of things on that particular topic. And that gave them a natural break in the right place, rather than students stopping and starting in different places. On average, we made those study sessions 1 to 2 hours, so the sort of time that you might reasonably sit down and study for. And that's been hugely successful. Another thing that we did, because we were directly authoring into the platform, is played about with doing live updates during presentation. What's the sort of things that we did? We looked at what the students were coming back to us on the discussion forum and let them help us a bit with co-creation. They might have found some other useful resource somewhere else, so we'd post it then in the main content for other students. We also provided other tailored optional support. You know, sometimes there was a topic that people wanted to know more of, so we'd add in sort of more optional study. But the other big thing that we were able to do is actually, as science stories that were relevant to our module hit the news, we also incorporated those directly into the learning and gave them links out, making it really sort of very much up to date. So one of the things that we looked at, for instance, is what killed the death of the dinosaurs. And in October time, what hit the news was the drilling of the borehole in offshore Mexico, the Chicxulub impact crater. So we were able to feed straight into that, and in fact I knocked up that content while cooking supper that night at home, which is fantastic. We polled the students immediately afterwards who didn't want the content to change. Just 1% would prefer it not to change. So, you know, my view now is life's a stage. It's always moving on. It's not this static content that we just leave there, so make it the stage. Some of the challenges we faced. The functionality of the HTML editor. It would be great to get a slightly better HTML editor, although we overcome all of those things, and of course you can do anything you like by going back into the code. It would be really nice, I think, to have some more in there. I had down duplication of units, subsections, and sections, but I now understand from earlier talks this week that that's been done in the later update. We're currently on Eucalyptus. The single folder for files and uploads was a slight issue. Luckily, we did come up with a naming convention that works. I'll tell you how many files we had in a minute. And our discussions, again, because this was mainstream undergraduate work, most of our students want to read every single post, comment, and response in there. So then managing that, I think, if we had more in terms of the ordering, it would be great. So here's one of our typical web pages. You can see the sections and things, see the authors there with link into their pages. We did some nice things with figure designs and things. We also customized the top tab bar. So altogether, the course is 250 web pages. It's 1,400 files and uploads. So you can see what having a single folder is like. And we spent over 6,000 hours in the authoring of it. What about the statistics from the students? So the upper graph there gives you the submission of each of the assessments. So remembering what Matthew said, these are learners that are part-time. Most of them are working full-time as well, or have got families and things that they care for. And the assessment point at 7 months after, we still had an 80% submission rate, which is very high. But the other thing, from the insights that we've got, looking at the activity on the platform, the other thing that we're pleased with is the fact that the students seem to be basically constantly active throughout the entire module from September when we released it right through until May now, rather than being driven by the particular assessment point. So the assessment points are shown by 01 to 05. The only dips that we see are basically when there are holidays, or when, just at the end here, when they're off doing their projects, so their geology projects, so a lot of them are going out into the field or town environments and things to do. We also ran a collaborative glossary, which we just invited the students to put entries into, and there's well over 640 entries into that. So really engaged. So I end on some of our student feedback, an excellent platform, and I've studied at a faster rate than what was recommended. So much better than just reading the books. I have to say how much I'm enjoying myself. It's a good book that I can't put down, and it really doesn't feel like studying. In fact, one gentleman wrote into us and said his wife was getting rather annoyed with him because he was spending all his time studying. And he didn't want to eat or sleep, he just wanted to carry on. And I've learned more on the course than any before. So these are final year undergraduates, don't forget, so they've been with us on a long journey. And it's great that everything is completely up to date with new updates happening all of the time. And finally, for you, this just came in the other day. One of the students said, I would like to study another subject through the Open edX platform. Okay, so now I'll hand over to Shantini, who will talk through how we've integrated with our main university system and manage the users. Shantini.
Hello, everyone. Hola. Okay, I'm Shantini Bradstock, and as it was introduced earlier, I'm looking after systems integration and user management. Okay, so I spent the last year looking at how things were done in the Open University platform for our standard students, what their journey was between what we call the home portal and their module websites. And I was tasked with mimicking something similar to that journey with Open edX. But here's the catch, without actually technically integrating the platform. So why were we trying to do this? Well, this diagram here shows what we were trying to achieve. It's never seen a graphics designer, sorry, it's all my own work. So our students go into our student home portal. We then overrode the logic in the home portal so that link generation was automatically created for Open edX rather than for our core platform. We did things like, with the help of our supplier, we batch registered users. We set up a script to auto-generate passwords and send them out to users. Our students would then go in through the student home portal, log into Open edX, and then they'd get their content. Now, it's slightly different in our platform in the way that we work, because we also provide offline formats. Why did we go through our home portal? Our home portal provides access to things like our assessment tools, study support access, your qualifications websites. So it was essential that we drove them through that portal. It also provides some of our students, like on W340, our law course, had to study full time. So that would be the equivalent of studying 3 courses at once. Okay. Sorry, my clicker appears to be not working at the moment. Okay, so really briefly, we map the roles based on the level of activities that users would have. So instead of doing setting up a tutor, which is similar to an instructor, giving them the instructor role, we gave them things like beta tester and discussion moderator. Our academics were much more involved in the course delivery. So they actually had discussion moderator permissions as well, and did more of the instructor level work as well. So some of the challenges that we encountered were we couldn't make minor theme and support page updates without going through our supplier. We had to go through a supplier to batch register users because there's system administration is not very strong in the Open edX platform. We couldn't delete users from our course, from our website, only from the courses. We did ask our supplier about this, and they advised us that it could only be done via the Django backend. And when we asked about if we could have access to it, they were a little bit, you know, because they wanted their websites to continue to work. Due to licensing and other issues that we faced, There were additional challenges around the exposure of the content to a wider audience and not being able to restrict access on certain types of pages. Sorry. Okay. Sorry, I just realised probably half of you haven't heard that talk, but apologies for that. So we have 21,000 students with disabilities and additional requirements. Not all of our students declare their additional requirements or disabilities. And we have a lot of different types of needs. So there's some that are provided via software solutions, some that are provided by hardware solutions, and some that are provided by a print requirement or met by the print requirement. This is an example of some of the requirements or some of the solutions to requirements that we have encountered. So you've got things like JAWS and Dragon, quite commonly known programs. You've got older programs like Claro Read and Browse Aloud. You've got alternative format requirements for screen reader optimized versions of Word and PDF. We have students who might have a mobility issue and who can't study at a screen for very long and therefore have a print requirement. And then you've got students who just use the operating system's native accessibility apps. Okay, so what do we do? What do we normally do? Well, usually our authors follow the top process, which is where they write their content in Word. We then get an assistant to tag it up for them in structured content XML. And then it gets rendered to a subpage in a course and into the other formats. So how did we meet the needs of the students with additional requirements? Well, we had developed a semi-automated process with a few manual trigger points and manual corrections. Using the lower process, we were able to export content from the Open edX platform, run it through HTML tidy, put it into Oxygen XML author. We did some mapping so that certain HTML tags were picked up and automatically passed through into structured content tagging. And then we were able from that, with a little bit of manual intervention from the assistants, to render it into Mobi, EPUB 3, Word, Kindle, so into multiple formats for those students. And then obviously we could, if people required a print copy, we were able to send it out to them. This is a quote we also very recently received, and this is from a student with additional requirements. I engaged with the course so much more. The best and only course I have not been glad to see the end of. Okay. So now I'm going to hand you over to my colleague, Matthew, who's going to talk about working with authors.
Okay, so I'm back. Can people hear me okay? Because I can't hear myself on the top thing. Am I mic'd up right now? Because yeah, am I good? Oh, there we go. Now I can hear me. So I'm back, and I got the shocking pink colour, which I kind of like. So, as we previously mentioned, most of the courses we've been running on Open edX have been, have been experiments in direct authoring and ownership. So, like most people who work with the platform, typically we have teams of specialists with different skills and specializations for course development. There's this weird translation that happens between, you've got authors, I've written a course, someone translates it into an online course, and the author goes at it and goes, oh, that's quite a nice course. It looks nothing like the one that I wrote, but I'm sure it's quite nice. We wanted to see what happens if we let loose authors like Angela. So when we first started S309, we instead, slightly foolishly, asked them what they wanted to do for themselves and what they wanted us to do for them. So, what do you want to do? They replied everything. We then intensely regretted asking the question, because we've got a big course development unit of about 300 people. And they said, go down the pub, we got this. Later on, though, there was, okay, actually, maybe not everything. Specialist input is valued, it just has to be employed in the right place. We then breathed a sigh of relief. One of the advantages of working with people who possess doctorates and other such fancy titles is typically they're much, much smarter than me. I'm just a course development guy at the end of the day. They know intensely complex subjects like law, geology, history, languages. All these things, they're difficult, but you can learn them fairly quickly. By stepping back and plugging the gaps for when authors actually needed our assistance, we're able to not only unleash the author's creativity, but at the same time put our skills to work where they're actually required. If we've got people with HTML skills, JavaScript skills, CSS skills, they can get working on the really fancy stuff that otherwise the academics wouldn't be able to do for themselves, bespoke activities. Whereas normally they'd be stuck, you know, let's float that image to the right, that'll look nice. It's a waste of their talents. So they can come up with really complex, innovative solutions. This means that we can use some of the principles that we use with students. Something that I'll go on about constantly to anyone who talks to me about it is the satisfaction that demonstration of mastery gives. This is common pedagogic knowledge that students love demonstrating mastery. That keeps them hooked on a course. They'll get through, they prove that they know it. They'll get that little fist pump. This is the exact same thing that makes video games fun, or keeps a developer going at 3 o'clock in the morning when you can't work out why your code won't compile, then suddenly it does, and you still have no idea why whatsoever, but you're really happy that it does. Authors who feel connected to their writing and are using the tools for themselves directly, no matter how familiar they are with it and how much help that they need, they can get a similar rush from seeing their courseware as it's meant to be, as the students will experience it in real time, without that disconnect. It keeps them engaged and passionate, and that comes through to their students, as I'm sure you can tell from Angela. So I've basically got a request to you guys, developers in the room, anyone else who has any sort of say in how tools and everything else is developed. Build tools that anyone can use. Like, you see Xblocks that require writing in XML. I can't give that to a history academic. Tools that have good UX, and Studio itself having better UX, leads to better courses. Better courses leads to happier students. It's common sense, but we focus so much on the student experience that sometimes the author experience gets neglected, and that does have an impact on materials. And just remember accessibility. That's always important. It's a core tenet of the platform and for us as well. But it's not just students who have accessibility needs. Authors have them as well. So make sure that your tools can be used by anyone, regardless of their background, to create good courses. So let's just polish off the recap here. Here's a quick recap of what we've done so far. So we've had about 50 super engaged authors. I've yet to find one in a single faculty that I've worked with that hasn't been able to pick up basic HTML. It's not something you'd expect. You just think, oh yeah, STEM academics can do it. Anyone can do it. And they can use that to make better web pages. We've somehow, through I can only assume sorcery that Shantine's come up with, some dark pact or another, mimics integration with complex systems without actually doing any technical integration work, which has really freed us up for a lot of other more complex developments. Well, not more complex, but different developments. And we've created some courses on a frankly frightening scale, as you saw with S309. I was told earlier this week by our provider that they frequently use S309 to basically test their servers, because if it can handle S309, it can handle anything. But we've also run into some barriers, and we'd love for you to join us in thinking about those. For example, the OLX format. It's nebulous, it's non-standard between versions. Xblocks dump their content into OLX in completely different, scary, strange ways. So when we're doing content conversions, we have to almost come up with bespoke solutions for each Xblock. Or go back and do a manual copy-paste job, which eats time. And discussions. Everyone knows discussions need improvements. Discussions are getting improvements, that's great. But there's things like tracking lurkers, as I like to call them, or active readers, as they're more nicely known. People who engage with the discussion forums, but don't post themselves. We have no idea where those people are, who those people are, how they're engaging, what benefit they're getting. Personalization, it's huge. People have issues enough as it is, dealing with how to fish through comments and discussions and all that stuff, when actually they just want to be able to manipulate and process all that information for themselves and sift through it in their own way. And it's a really weird basic one that I wish we had is topic subscription. At the moment, you can follow posts. What if you want to follow a topic? That's a really core one that comes up constantly. I probably get emailed about it weekly. We can't do it. I'd really like to. Can someone do that, please? I'd love that. Thanks. So, thanks for listening to me waffle and to these guys giving their wonderful presentations. Did we actually leave enough time for any questions? 3 minutes for questions. Wonderful. Have we got any? One over there. Have we actually still got a microphone, or has Shantine nicked it?
No, I've got the microphone.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'll repeat the question. So
you mentioned build tools that anyone can use, not just specialists.
Mhm.
You said for course authoring you use Studio.
Yep.
How did that work for you when 18 different authors collaborated on the same course with Studio? Did you run into conflicts? And how did you resolve that?
Sure. I mean, Angela can probably answer that one a bit better than me, but sure. So the question was, in fact, I'll ask Angela. Hey, Angela, how you doing? How did you deal with multiple authors using Studio all at the same time? Did you run into any conflicts or anything like that that got in the way of them authoring?
Okay, so we did it several different ways. So the first thing was that in terms of the subsections, those were divided up by authors. So there was a lead author on different ones. Some of them, yeah, they were co-authored. So then it was up to them to sort of align between them. But we were constantly commenting on each other's materials, and we needed to find a way to track that. So in fact, all we did was each have a different colour, and we just tracked our comments by putting it in a different colour. And that actually worked really well, because it meant that we had to trust each other, that, you know, you didn't mess up somebody else's content or add something that, you know, wasn't okayed. Which helped us to really pull together as a team. The other thing that we did constantly all the time was duplicate the individual components. So, you know, say an author was struggling with, you know, a bit of the code or something of how to do it, I could just go in, duplicate that, fix the things for them, or they could go to Matthew to do that. Or it might be, okay, they got a bit of text there, that would be pedagogically better done in this particular way. So again, you could go in, duplicate it, write it in another way, and then let the author have that ownership and decide what it was that they wanted to do. In a few instances, for some of the more complex stuff, we simply copied and pasted, shoved it into Word, and used track changes. But that was if it, you know, needed to go outside. But most of the time, yeah, we just found working in the platform was great. And it was like, it was liberating in a way, because we didn't always have this baggage of these old versions and what's happened. It was, you know, it was a product that was constantly moving forward in a really dynamic way.
Anyone down here?
A little bit more on the authoring experience. Was the course brand new, or was it kind of based on a previous course that had much of the same material?
Okay, so the question was the course brand new, or was it based upon existing material? So the course was a new course in the way that we structured it all together. In some parts of the course, we referred to certain sections of textbooks and things which we provided as PDFs or as accessible versions in Word, and also the scientific literature. So, you know, the students engage with the primary scientific literature too, in terms of papers.
And for a big course, you know, that size, 9 months,
Mm-hmm.
If you were doing it again now, do you think you'd restructure it as maybe a sequence of courses so that you have that extra level of hierarchy, or were you quite happy with what you ended up with?
No, we're definitely very happy with the structure and what we ended up with. I can't emphasize enough that having those web pages as those single study sessions and pedagogical content has just been brilliant. You know, the students come back and they say, you know, no longer am I faced by this course that sort of stretches off into the distance. You know, I know that, you know, tonight I've got 2 hours and I can sit down and do that one. Okay, you know, if somebody's got more time and they want to get ahead and do more, they can do. It's completely flexible, but it's worked brilliantly. And we've got, you know, in the module, they're not really, you know, there's a lot of links for different materials and a building up of all the different skills. So it's really important having it all together.
Do you have group projects to be done with distance? And also, are the students supposed to all start at the same time, or can they do the course as they want, or are they deadlines?
Yeah. So the first question was, are there group projects? So yes, there is group stuff that they do together. So the collaborative glossary was one thing. So we encourage them all to post and then to comment on each other's post. As I said, there's about 640 entries and many comments. So they were gradually building on those and iterating on those. They've worked together on helping to shape the hypotheses for the main project that they do at the end, which is utilizing their skills. And actually, what's also happened is that the discussion forum has been very active, and they've helped each other a lot with, you know, IT issues, that sort of thing, you know, so having the staff to come in. So that was around us creating a culture where they could work together. The second question was about, sorry, remind me?
About the timing.
Oh yeah, the timing of it, yes. So the course, they all started at the same time and study together, but of course, because they're part-time, they won't all be on exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. In fact, we said to them, we think it would be best if you studied as a cohort and worked together, sort of plus or minus a week. And that's, in fact, what many of them have done. I should have said the other thing that we did, which was a really important thing, was use the embedded discussions to get them to do things collaboratively. So, for instance, we gave them some scientific data, gave them one plausible explanation, and said, right, go away, research this, see if there's any other plausible explanations, post something, and then get people to vote on different posts or add to them or add more discussions, and then we pull that all together in terms of a summary of, well, you know, these many of you found this out, and so on and so forth.
Okay. I think we're out of time now, so thank you very much. That's us.